Imagine hiring an apprentice, teaching him your trade, watching him go out into the world and build an empire, and then, one day, he comes back and buys the company right out from under you. That, in essence, is the story of Singer Motors Limited and William Roots. It is 1956. Britain is still shaking off the dust of the Suez Crisis. Petrol rationing has briefly returned. The post-war optimism of the early 1950s has given way to something more cautious, more calculating. The British motor industry is consolidating at a furious pace, and the men with the real money are making their moves. Into this landscape steps Sir William Roots, one of the most powerful figures in British motoring. His Roots Group already controls Hillman, Humber, Sunbeam, and Talbot. But there is one more name he wants, one that carries an emotional weight no price tag can fully measure. Singer, a name that had been making cars in Coventry since 1901. A brand that had, at its peak, stood as Britain's third largest car manufacturer, a company that William Roots himself once swept the floors of as a young apprentice. He gets it. For a fraction of what it was once worth, Roots acquires Singer Motors in the closing weeks of 1955. And within a year, the first new Singer, a car called the Gazelle, rolls out of the factory. On the surface, it looks promising. Smart lines, a traditional Singer grille, walnut veneer on the dashboard. But if you lifted the bonnet, looked at the floor pan, studied the door pressings, you would have found the truth that the marketing men preferred to keep quiet. This Singer was, in almost every meaningful way, a Hillman Minx. A Hillman Minx with a different badge on the bonnet, a slightly better interior, and a price tag that asked you to pay for the privilege of pretending otherwise. This is the story of the Singer Gazelle, how it was born, what it promised, what it delivered, and how, over 14 years, it quietly smothered an 80-year-old legacy. Topic 1. Singer's Golden Era. From bicycles to Britain's third largest carmaker. To understand what was lost, you need to understand what Singer once was. George Singer was born in Dorset in 1847. He came to Coventry in 1869, working first at the Coventry Machinists Company under James Starley, the father of the British cycle industry. In 1875, George set up on his own. Singer & Co. began as a bicycle maker. At its peak, the firm was arguably the largest cycle manufacturer in the world. The very grounding of modern bicycle design, the raked front forks that made penny farthings safer, was something George Singer himself patented in 1878. George Singer also gave something lasting to his city. He was appointed mayor of Coventry 3 times, and in 1883, his employees started a football team they called Singers FC. In 1898, that team changed its name. Today you might know it as Coventry City Football Club. George Singer died in January of 1909, but the company he founded did not stand still. In 1901, Singer had taken its first steps into motorized vehicles, and by 1905, the firm had its first proper 4-wheel car. In 1912, Singer launched something genuinely significant. The Singer 10, widely regarded as the world's first practical light car, not a fragile cycle car, not a motorized bath chair. A proper, solidly built small car with a 4-cylinder 10-horsepower engine that an ordinary family could afford, depend upon, and be proud to own. Here is where our story takes its first ironic turn. At the Olympia Motor Show that year, a young Singer apprentice named William Roots saw the 10, grasped its potential immediately, and contracted to buy 50 of them, the entire first year's production. Those 50 cars, and the profits they generated, helped set Billy Roots on the path to building his own automotive empire. The company that would eventually swallow Singer whole was partly funded by Singer's own success. Singer did not stop there. Through the 1920s, the company grew at a remarkable pace. In 1926, Singer manufactured 9,000 cars. By 1929, it had 7 factories, 8,000 employees, and turned out 28,000 vehicles in a single year. It was Britain's third largest car manufacturer, behind only Austin and Morris. Singer also built a genuine sporting reputation. The Singer 9, with its 848 cubic centimeter overhead camshaft engine, became a favorite in trials and club racing. Singer entered works cars at Le Mans. This was not merely a volume builder, it was a manufacturer with engineering pride and a genuine identity on the circuit. Topic 2. The long decline. Post-war struggles and the path to bankruptcy. The late 1930s were turbulent. A management crisis following a disastrous showing at the 1935 Ulster Tourist Trophy, where 3 of the 4 works Singer 9s crashed at the same point on the circuit due to identical steering failures, prompted a boardroom clean-out. Singer & Co. was dissolved in December of 1936 and reconstituted as Singer Motors Limited. The golden era was effectively over. After the Second World War, Singer returned to civilian production, much as it had left, with pre-war designs dusted off and put back into service. It was a common enough story in those years. Everyone was in survival mode. In 1948, Singer tried to move forward with the SM1500. It had independent front suspension, monocoque body construction, and Singer's well-regarded 1,500 cubic centimeter overhead camshaft engine. On paper, it was a genuine step forward. But it was priced at £799 more expensive than comparable cars from far larger manufacturers, and the buying public largely looked the other way. Through the early 1950s, Singer tried various remedies. Twin carburetors were offered in 1953 to boost performance. Experiments with a fiberglass-bodied roadster followed in 1954. In 1955, the SM1500 was facelifted into the Singer Hunter, a reasonable-looking car with a more traditional grille. But none of these measures were enough to reverse the fundamental problem. Singer was an independent, medium-sized manufacturer in a market rapidly consolidating around a handful of giants. By late 1955, the situation had become critical. Singer Motors entered a financial crisis from which it could not escape on its own. In December of that year, the company was acquired by the Rootes Group. The Singer factory on Canterbury Street in Coventry, that magnificent building George Singer had constructed in 1891, with its French chateau-style frontage and mosaic-floored entrance hall, passed into other hands. But Singer, as an independent company with its own engineering program and its own character, was finished. Topic 3. The Rootes takeover. What a badge is actually worth. Understanding why the Rootes Group handled Singer the way it did requires a brief look at how Rootes operated. Sir William Rootes had built his empire on efficiency, volume, and shared platforms. The Rootes Group was not in the business of maintaining multiple independent engineering lines. It was in the business of selling as many cars as possible, at different price points, to different buyers. Think of it as the British equivalent of General Motors' famous ladder of brands, a car for every purse and every purpose. In the Rootes world, Hillman sat at the bottom, practical, affordable, unpretentious. Humber occupied the top, large, expensive, conspicuously respectable. Sunbeam handled the sporting end of things, and now Singer would slot in just above Hillman, a step up in refinement, a touch more wood and chrome. A name that appealed to the respectable middle-class British buyer who wanted something slightly better than the ordinary, without paying the price of genuine luxury. What Rootes had principally bought was factory capacity and a ready-made dealership network. The Singer name was a strategically useful bonus, nothing more. There was no plan to invest in Singer engineering, to develop a Singer-specific platform, or to maintain any genuine independent Singer identity. The mark would be kept alive as long as it generated a profitable premium over the Minx, not a day longer. And here lies the deep irony. The 50 Singer 10s that young William Rootes sold as an apprentice gave him the capital and contacts to build his motor-dealing empire in the first place. The apprentice had returned as the master, and what he decided to do with his old employer's legacy would define the last chapter of a story that had started 80 years before, when George Singer first set up his workshop on Canterbury Street. Topic 4. The Singer Gazelle Series 1. A new car built on old promises. And so we arrive at September of 1956, and the launch of the Singer Gazelle Series 1. The car was built on what Roots called the audax platform, audax being Latin for daring, which is either admirably self-confident or deliciously ironic depending on your perspective. This platform underpinned three cars: the Hillman Minx Saloon, the Sunbeam Rapier Coupe, and now the Singer Gazelle. The bodies were styled with significant help from Raymond Loewy's American design organization, the same team responsible for some of the most celebrated Studebaker designs of the early 1950s. The result was a genuinely attractive car: clean three-box lines, a wraparound rear window, modest chrome brightwork, and an overall shape that looked modern without being ostentatious. What made the Series 1 Gazelle a Singer, specifically? Essentially three things. First, the traditional Singer oval grille, that distinctive upright oval shape that had been the Mark's calling card since the pre-war years. Second, a higher specification interior, walnut veneer on the fascia, a better grade of upholstery, bumper overriders, a heater, and windscreen washers, all standard, where the basic Minx owner had to pay extra. Third, and most crucially, the engine. The Series 1 used Singer's own 1,497 cubic centimeter single overhead camshaft, 4-cylinder unit, developing 49 brake horsepower through a single Solex carburetor, a well-proven, smooth, characterful engine, and a genuine piece of Singer engineering heritage. The new car was offered initially as a 4-door saloon and a 2-door convertible. The saloon was priced at £898 and 7 shillings, a meaningful premium over the Hillman Minx, and in line with the Wolseley 1500, its most direct rival from the BMC stable. Suspension followed the Minx pattern: independent coil springs at the front, a live axle on half-elliptic leaf springs at the rear, with drums all round. Was it a real Singer? In spirit, partially. In engineering, only just and not for long. Dinky Toys seemed to agree the car was worth commemorating. Their scale model, catalogue number 168, depicted the Series 1 Gazelle from 1959 and remained in production until 1963. Topic 5. Series by Series: the systematic erasure of an identity. The Gazelle's story from 1957 onwards is a sequence of small steps, each individually unremarkable, but collectively amounting to a profound transformation of character. The Series 2 arrived in October of 1957, with restyled bodywork flanking the grille, chrome-cowled headlamps, and sidelights relocated into new horizontal grilles on either side of the main oval. More usefully, an estate car version became available for the first time, along with optional Laycock de Normanville overdrive and a larger fuel tank. These were genuinely welcome improvements. Then came the Series 2A in August of 1958, and this is where the story changes at a fundamental level. The Singer overhead camshaft engine, the last mechanical thread connecting the Gazelle to the company's own engineering heritage, was removed and replaced by the standard Hillman pushrod overhead valve unit. 1,494 cubic centimeters, 56 brake horsepower. The replacement was actually a power increase. The Hillman engine was more modern, simpler to manufacture, and easier to service. From a purely commercial standpoint, the decision made complete sense. But it also meant that from August of 1958 onwards, the Singer Gazelle was, mechanically, a Hillman Minx, not closely related to a Hillman Minx. A Hillman Minx, with walnut on the dashboard and an oval badge on the nose. The Series 3, in September of 1958, brought improved seating and optional two-tone paint. The Series 3A of 1959 added small tail fins, a deeper windscreen, twin Solex carburetors, raising output to 60 brake horsepower, and a floor-mounted gear change as standard. The Series 3C of 1961 fitted a 1,592 cubic centimeter engine and added 1,600 badges to the front doors. In August of 1963, the Series 5 arrived with a restyled body, longer rear doors, a squared-off roofline, and standard front disc brakes. The fins were gone. The look was calmer. It was a thoroughly decent small saloon. roughly 20,000 were sold. At £724, it cost £88 more than the equivalent Hillman Minx Series 5 at £636, and £177 more than a Morris Minor. By 1965, the Series 6 arrived. The engine was all new, 1,725 cubic centimeters, 5 main bearings, initially developing 65 brake horsepower. And the grille, that oval Singer grille, the one surviving visual link to the original mark, was now replaced by a plain rectangular affair, no longer attached to the opening bonnet. Even that last thread of visual identity was cut. Topic 6. The Arrow, Chrysler, and the end of the line. January of 1967 saw the launch of what Roots called the Singer Gazelle Series 7. It rode the completely new Arrow body, essentially the same shell as the Hillman Hunter. The old Audax curves, the oval grille, the walnut on the fascia, the very architecture that had given the car its particular character, all of it was gone. This was an entirely anonymous saloon, distinguished from its Hillman sibling by little more than a chrome strip and a badge that most people in a car park could not have identified. By this point, the forces conspiring against Singer were overwhelming. Sir William Roots, who had personally guided the group through its great years of expansion, had died in 1964. The company he left behind was struggling. In the financial year 1966 to 1967, the Roots Group lost some £10 million. Chrysler, the American corporation that had been buying into Roots since 1964, assumed full control in 1967. The new American owners had neither the knowledge nor the sentiment to maintain a roster of overlapping British marques that had been living off badge-engineered identity for over a decade. In March of 1970, Chrysler announced that the Singer name would no longer appear in their range. The last Singer, a Vogue, not a Gazelle, rolled off the assembly line in April of 1970. Almost a century after George Singer built his first bicycle on Canterbury Street, the name was gone. The factory site was eventually redeveloped. Today it is home to Singer Hall, a hall of residence for students at Coventry University. The Singer name lives on in brick, if not in steel. It is believed the brand rights passed eventually to Peugeot through the later acquisition of Chrysler's European operations. There is no indication that anyone intends to revive it. So, what do we make of the Singer Gazelle and the story it represents? It would be easy and perhaps satisfying to cast Sir William Roots as the villain of this piece. The man who learned his trade at Singer's knee, who made his first fortune selling Singer 10s, and who returned decades later to strip the carcass. But Singer Motors was financially exhausted long before Roots arrived. The SM1500 had failed. Post-war models had failed to find their market. The company was in administration. Whatever Roots's intentions, he was not robbing a healthy enterprise. He was buying the remains of a once great one, attempting to get some useful commercial service out of what was left. And to be fair to the Gazelle itself, it was not a bad car. The buyer who chose it over the Minx received a genuinely better specified vehicle, that walnut dashboard, superior upholstery, the overdrive option, unavailable on the Minx, the added chrome. The Series 5 and Series 6 were accomplished, honest small saloons that gave years of dependable service to thousands of British families. The Singer Owners Club, established as far back as 1951, continues to this day, a testament to the genuine affection these cars inspire in those who know them. Restored Gazelles currently fetch between £3,500 and £7,300 at auction, which speaks to a collector market that remembers them with real warmth. But the Gazelle also represents something worth thinking about carefully. The slow, systematic erasure of a genuine engineering identity, replaced first by shared mechanical components, then by a shared body, then by nothing but a badge. The more than 120,000 British-built Gazelles produced over 14 years were, in varying degrees, Hillman Minxes with pretensions. The tragedy is not that they were bad cars. The tragedy is that they were never really Singers at all. If you owned one, or your father did, or you remember seeing them parked outside houses in the 1960s, we would love to hear your memories in the comments below. What did the Gazelle mean to your family? Did you spot the difference between it and the Minx it was built upon? If you found this video useful, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. We research every detail as carefully as we can and aim to bring you honest, accurate histories of the cars that shaped British roads and British lives. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.